The Pleistocene Epoch is a geological time period that includes the last ice age, when glaciers covered huge parts of the globe. Also called the Pleistocene era, this epoch began about 2.6 million years ago and ended 11,700 years ago. Modern humans, or Homo sapiens, evolved during the Pleistocene and spread across most of Earth before the period ended. The epoch also featured Ice Age giants such as woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats, many of which disappeared at the end of the Pleistocene in a major extinction event. Earth has been experiencing a trend of cooling for about the past 50 million years. About 4.5 million years ago, the Isthmus of Panama land bridge formed between North America and South America, which may have triggered the last ice age. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans could no longer exchange tropical water, forcing warm water northward and increasing precipitation in the northern hemisphere, which fell as snow. The snowfall created glaciers and ice sheets, thus deflecting sunlight and continuing Earth's cooling trend. The last ice age is known for hosting many large mammals called megafauna. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, and mastodons roamed North America during this period. But it wasn't just giant mammals. An 11-foot-tall, 3 meters tall flightless bird that weighed almost as much as a polar bear inhabited Europe during the early Pleistocene. Meanwhile, Megalania prisca, the largest known terrestrial lizard, lived in open forests, woodlands, and other Pleistocene habitats across much of eastern Australia during the epoch. Megalania prisca, a large monitor lizard that was first described from the Darling Downs in Queensland by Sir Richard Owen in 1859. Megalania would have been a formidable reptilian predator, like its relative the Komodo dragon of Indonesia, and may have eaten large mammals, snakes, other reptiles, and birds. It was an enormous lizard, up to 7 meters or 23 feet long, with an unusual crest on its snout. A smaller but similar crest is also seen in Varanus giganteus and in other Australian species. Its weight is estimated to be around 1,940 kilograms, or 4,280 pounds. The teeth of Megalania were sharp and recurved, with wrinkled, enfolded enamel. Megalania had small bones or osteoderms embedded in the skin of the snout and nape of the neck. Its postcranial skeleton is poorly known, but its proportions were unlike those of other monitors. Judging from its size, it would have fed mostly upon medium to large-sized animals, including any of the giant marsupials, such as the Diprotodon, along with other reptiles and small mammals, as well as birds and their eggs and chicks. Quincana, a genus of terrestrial crocodiles that grew up to 6 meters or 19.6 feet, was present until around 40,000 years ago, and has also been marked as another apex predator of Australian megafauna. Komodo dragons, Megalania's closest relative, are known to have evolved in Australia before spreading to their current range in Indonesia, as fossil evidence from Queensland has implied. The scales of Megalania would possibly be similar to those of their extant relatives, possessing a honeycomb microstructure and both durable and resilient to water evaporation. Along with other varanid lizards, such as the Komodo dragon and the Nile monitor, Megalania belongs to the proposed clade Toxicophera, which contains all known reptile clades possessing toxin-secreting oral glands. Varanids are more closely related to snakes rather than other lizards. Molecular evidence suggests that varanids evolved during the early Cretaceous, between 140 and 100 million years ago, although there is no fossil evidence for this yet. Varanids would have arrived in Australia from Asia across microcontinents, which have been in existence between Australia and Asia since the early Cretaceous. Megalania is believed to have gone extinct somewhere between 40,000 and 50,000 years ago. Humans arrived on the Australian continent roughly 65,000 years ago. Megalania's reason for extinction likely had something to do with humans. It wasn't necessarily that people hunted Megalania, although they could have, but instead that humans hunted Megalania's prey extensively. As a result, there would have been fewer species for Megalania to eat. That scarcity would have affected other apex predators as well, reducing their feeding pool and contributing to competition. The presence of a new apex predator, Homo sapiens, did a lot of damage to the existing ecosystem, especially to animals like Megalania, which were particularly slow-moving. Arctodus. Arctodus, the giant short-faced bear, was one of the scariest predators of the Pleistocene epoch, full-grown adults rearing up to heights of 3.3 to 3.6 meters, or 11 to 13 feet, and capable of running at top speeds of 48 kilometers per hour, or 30 miles per hour. This ancient bear had a superb sense of smell that it used to track down its prey. The first discovery of Arctodus fossils dates back to 1854. A paleontologist named Joseph Leidy found Arctodus fossils in South Carolina, specifically in the Ashley phosphate beds. There are two recognized species: the lesser short-faced bear, Arctodus pristinus, and the giant short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. Of these species, Arctodus simus was larger, is known from more complete remains, and is considered one of the most charismatic of North America's megafauna. Arctodus pristinus was largely restricted to the early Pleistocene of the eastern United States, whereas Arctodus simus had a broader range, with more finds being from the late Pleistocene of the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Arctodus simus ranged between 300 and 950 kilograms, or 660 to 2,000 pounds. Its skull and shearing type of teeth indicate a highly carnivorous way of life. Its eye sockets are set wide apart and face forward, giving it excellent vision. Its short, broad snout had a huge nasal passage, which probably means it had a keen sense of smell and could inhale great volumes of oxygen while pursuing prey. The large width of the jaws in relation to their shortness, plus the huge insertions for biting muscle, gave this bear a vice-like killing bite and the ability to crush bones to obtain marrow. Paleontologists are not sure about the reason behind this animal's extinction. However, it is thought that Arctodus pristinus became extinct about 300,000 years ago because of climate change and competition for food with other ursids. Arctodus simus died out about 12,000 years ago, likely because of an ecological collapse depriving Arctodus of prey and vegetation. More specifically, one theory says that when the ancient Clovis people moved into North America, they used a particular type of spear to kill the large prey eaten by this bear. As its prey disappeared, the population of the Arctodus decreased as well. A second theory is that the glaciation in the Pleistocene age killed off the Arctodus along with many other types of animals. Smilodon. Smilodon is a genus of felids belonging to the extinct subfamily Machaerodontinae, and is one of the best-known saber-toothed predators. Although commonly known as the saber-toothed tiger, it was not closely related to the tiger or other modern cats. Smilodon lived in the Americas during the Pleistocene epoch. The genus was named in 1842 based on fossils from Brazil. The generic name means scalpel or two-edged knife, combined with tooth. Three species are recognized today: Smilodon gracilis, Smilodon fatalis, and Smilodon populator. The latter two species were probably descended from S. gracilis, which itself probably evolved from Megantherion. Smilodon was more robustly built than any extant cat, with particularly well-developed forelimbs and exceptionally long upper canine teeth. Its jaws had a bigger gape than that of modern cats, and its upper canines were slender and fragile, being adapted for precision killing. Smilodon gracilis was the smallest species at 55 to 100 kilograms, or 120 to 220 pounds in weight. Smilodon facilis had a weight of 160 to 280 kilograms, or 350 to 620 pounds, and a height of 100 centimeters, or 39 inches. Both of these species are mainly known from North America. Smilodon populator from South America was the largest species at 220 to 436 kilograms, or 485 to 961 pounds in weight, and 120 centimeters or 47 inches in height, and was among the largest known felids. The heel bone of Smilodon was fairly long, which suggests it was a good jumper. Its well-developed flexor and extensor muscles in its forelimbs probably enabled it to pin down and securely hold down large prey. Despite being more powerfully built than other large cats, Smilodon had a weaker bite. Modern big cats have more pronounced zygomatic arches, While these were smaller in Smilodon, which restricted the thickness and therefore power of the temporalis muscles and thus reduced Smilodon's bite force. However, Smilodon's gape could have reached over 110 degrees, while that of a modern lion reaches 65 degrees. This made the gape wide enough to allow Smilodon to grasp large prey despite the long canines. Evidence in the fossil record suggests that the cats may have had a social structure. Some fossils show evidence of serious injuries, like broken bones and dislocated hips. However, the fossils also show that these injuries had time to heal, or that the cats lived with them for a long time. Such injuries probably would have been fatal for solitary hunters. For this reason, some paleontologists suspect that healthy cats either actively provided injured Smilodon with food or did not stop them from picking over freshly killed carcasses. The woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth is an extinct species of mammoth that lived from the Middle Pleistocene until its extinction in the Holocene Epoch. The woolly mammoth began to diverge from the steppe mammoth about 800,000 years ago in Siberia. Its closest extant relative is the Asian elephant. The woolly mammoth was roughly the same size as a modern African elephant. Males reached shoulder heights between 2.67 and 3.49 meters, or 8.8 and 11.5 feet, and weighed between 3.9 and 8.2 tons. The woolly mammoth was well adapted to the cold environment during the last ice age. It was covered in fur, with an outer covering of long guard hairs and a shorter undercoat. The color of the coat varied from dark to light. The ears and tail were short to minimize frostbite and heat loss. It had long, curved tusks and 4 molars, which were replaced 6 times during the lifetime of an individual. Its behavior was similar to that of modern elephants, and it used its tusks and trunk for manipulating objects, fighting, and foraging. The woolly mammoth's diet mainly consisted of grasses and sedges, and individuals could probably reach the age of 60, inhabiting the mammoth steppe that stretched across northern Eurasia and North America. The woolly mammoth coexisted with early humans, who used its bones and tusks for making art, tools, and dwellings, and hunted the species for food. The population of woolly mammoths declined at the end of the late Pleistocene, with the last populations on mainland Siberia persisting until around 10,000 years ago. Like modern elephants, woolly mammoths were likely very social and lived in matriarchal or female-led family groups. This is supported by fossil assemblages and cave paintings, showing groups, implying that most of their other social behaviors were likely similar to those of modern elephants. The existence of preserved soft tissue remains and DNA of woolly mammoths has led to the idea that the species could be resurrected by scientific means. Several methods have been proposed to achieve this. Cloning would involve removal of the DNA-containing nucleus of the egg cell of a female elephant and replacement with a nucleus from woolly mammoth tissue. The cell would then be stimulated into dividing and inserted back into a female elephant. The resulting calf would have the genes of the woolly mammoth, although its fetal environment would be different. American Mastodon. The American Mastodon was a large land mammal that roamed North America throughout the Ice Age until as recently as 13,000 years ago. Mastodons lived in pine forests and boggy areas covered by larch and spruce, feeding on twigs, leaves, and water plants. Adapted for life at the water's edge, they had broad feet and stubby, wide-splayed toe bones. This allowed them to walk on the soft, waterlogged ground beside ponds and lakes. The American Mastodon, Mammoth americanum, is an extinct species of proboscidine. Although they likely resembled mammoths and elephants in external appearance, American mastodons belong to the taxonomic family Mammutidae, while mammoths and elephants to Elephantidae. The earliest record of the American mastodon dates to about 3.75 million years ago and comes from south-central Washington in the United States. American mastodons lived across much of Canada. The American mastodon's diet consisted of trees, shrubs, and herbs found in woodlands and similar habitats. Sedges and grasses found in the intestines of a mastodon from Ohio indicate some grazing, perhaps reflecting seasonal differences in diet. American mastodons were likely long-lived, with lifespans exceeding 50 years. They probably had some form of social structure similar to living elephants, where adult females and juveniles formed groups or herds. Ancestral populations that may have given rise to American mastodons first traveled to Canada during the Middle Miocene, 15.5 million years ago, via the Bering Strait, when low sea levels created a land bridge between Canada and portions of eastern Russia. Different hypotheses regarding whether or not these ancestral populations arrived in North America all at once or over the course of multiple journeys shaped the view of how American mastodons evolved. The extinction of American mastodons and other large-bodied Ice Age animals remains an area of intense study. Proposed causes of extinction include climate and environmental change, human predation, disease, and meteorite impact. American mastodons became locally extinct in some regions of Canada, the Yukon, earlier than elsewhere in North America. This is likely because of ecological shifts that predated the end of the Pleistocene Epoch. Regardless of the cause, all populations of American mastodons became extinct across their range near the end of the Pleistocene Epoch, about 10,000 years ago. Giant ground sloth. Megatherium is an extinct genus of ground sloths endemic to South America that lived from the early Pliocene through the end of the Pleistocene. It is best known for the elephant-sized type species Megatherium americanum, sometimes known as the giant ground sloth or the Megatherae, native to the Pampas through southern Bolivia during the Pleistocene. Megatherium is part of the sloth family Megatheridae, which also includes the similarly giant Eremotherium, comparable in size to Megatherium americanum, which was native to tropical South America, Central America, and North America. Megatherium was first discovered in 1787 on the bank of the Luján River in Argentina. The holotype specimen was subsequently transported to Spain the next year, where it attracted the interest of the paleontologist Georges Cuvier. He was the first to ascertain, through comparative anatomy, that Megatherium belonged to the sloth family. Megatherium americanum was up to 10 times the size of living sloths, reaching weights of up to 4 tons, similar to a present-day bull elephant. On its hind legs, Megatherium americanum would have stood a full 3.5 meters or 12 feet tall. We know that they overlapped with humans in time, as Megatherium fossils have been found with cut marks in them, suggesting that these giant sloths were on the menu thousands of years ago. Despite its magnificent claws, Megatherium americanum was a vegetarian. This has been confirmed through chemical analysis of its teeth, which record what it ate during life. It was able to stand and walk on its hind legs, making it the largest bipedal mammal of all time. Footprints attributed to Megatherium americanum, dating to around 14,000 years ago, have been found in Argentina, just 40 kilometers from a site where the young Charles Darwin collected the remains of this animal between 1832 and 1833. The giant ground sloth lived mostly in groups, but it may have lived singly in caves. It probably had mainly a browsing diet in open habitats, but also it probably fed on other moderate to soft, tough food. For millions of years, the sloth did not have many enemies to bother it, so it was probably a diurnal animal. What killed off the woolly mammoth, the scimitar cat, and North America's other Ice Age mega-mammals? Homo sapiens usually gets a good chunk of the blame. Scientists have long speculated that humans killed and devoured ground sloths, but for many years there was no physical evidence to support this idea. Then, in 2008, incriminating scars were found on the femur of an Ohio Megalonyx. The 13,000-year-old fossil is riddled with 41 unusual cuts that appear to have been left by man-made tools. Direwolf. The direwolf, Aenocyan dirus, is an extinct canine. The direwolf lived in the Americas with a possible single record also known from East Asia during the late Pleistocene and early Holocene epochs, 125,000 to 9,500 years ago. The direwolf was a massive carnivore, weighing up to 90 kilograms or 200 pounds. These relatives of the grey wolf, Canis lupus, were about 25% larger than the biggest modern wolf species. In fact, they measured up to 1 meter or 3.3 feet at the shoulder, and 1.75 meters or 5.7 feet in length. It is important to know that these massive wolves were once classified in the genus Canis. Since that time, scientists have been able to sequence the direwolf's DNA from fossils discovered in North America. This sequencing shows that these animals are genetically unique when compared to members of the genus Canis. The large prehistoric wolves may have looked much like grey wolves, but they could not have interbred with them or other members of that genus. Jackals are closer relatives to the direwolf. The similar morphological characteristics between direwolves and grey wolves may be a result of convergent evolution and not a shared ancestry. For this reason, scientists have now reclassified the direwolf into its own genus. Fossils of direwolves have been found all across North America and into South America. In the United States, fossils have shown that the animal was adapted to multiple habitats, from grasslands to coastal open woodlands to tropical wetlands. In South America, fossils dating to about 17,000 years ago have been found in Venezuela, Peru, and Bolivia. A partial jaw of a direwolf was recently identified in China, suggesting that the animal crossed the Bering Land Bridge into Asia from North America. This wolf was a hypercarnivore, just like modern cats and dogs. This means these prehistoric mammals enjoyed a diet of at least 70% meat. Their prey included horses and pronghorn deer. They would also sometimes eat sloths, mastodon, woolly rhinoceros, bison, and camel. As food became scarce and the direwolf species struggled to find prey, they would eat just about any herbivore they could find. Overall, their teeth were sharper and better at slicing into the meat, but the canine teeth were more rounded, enabling them to crush bone and more easily feed on nutrient-packed marrow from their prey. Direwolves hunted prey ranging from 600 pounds to more than 1,300 pounds. They could take down prey more than 6 times their own body weight. The migration of humans and increased competition for food are believed to be two major causes for the extinction of direwolves. Humans preyed upon the same herbivores as the wolves and became increasingly better at hunting, making it harder for the direwolf to find enough food. Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus is an extinct genus of ape that lived in southern China from 2 million to approximately 300,000 years ago during the early to middle Pleistocene, represented by one species, Gigantopithecus blaki. The first remains of Gigantopithecus, 2-third molar teeth, were identified in a drugstore by anthropologist Ralph von Koenigswald in 1935, who subsequently described the ape. In 1956, the first mandible and more than 1,000 teeth were found in Luicheng, and numerous more remains have since been found in at least 16 sites. Only teeth and 4 mandibles are known currently, and other skeletal elements were likely consumed by porcupines before they could fossilize. Gigantopithecus was once argued to be a hominin, a member of the human line, but it is now thought to be closely allied with orangutans, classified in the subfamily Ponginae. Traditionally, Gigantopithecus has been depicted as a colossal, gorilla-like creature, measuring 4 meters or 10 feet in length and possibly weighing between 200 and 300 kilograms, 440 to 660 pounds in life. However, due to the scarcity of remains, estimating its overall size remains highly speculative. The incisors are reduced and the canines appear to have functioned like cheek teeth, premolars and molars. The premolars are high-crowned, and the 4th premolar is very molar-like. The molars are the largest of any known ape and have a relatively flat surface. Gigantopithecus had the thickest enamel by absolute measure of any ape, up to 6 millimeters, a quarter of an inch in some areas, though this is only fairly thick when tooth size is taken into account. Gigantopithecus appears to have been a generalist herbivore of forest plants, with the jaw adapting to grinding, crushing, and cutting through tough, fibrous plants, and the thick enamel functioning to resist foods with abrasive particles, such as stems, roots, and tubers with dirt. The high levels of sexual dimorphism could indicate relatively intense male-male competition, though considering the upper canines only projected slightly farther than the cheek teeth, canine display was probably not very important in agonistic behavior, unlike modern non-human apes. Gigantopithecus has become popular in cryptozoology circles as the identity of the Tibetan Yeti or the American Bigfoot, ape-like creatures in local folklore. The largest known primate, Gigantopithecus blaki, likely died out between 295,000 and 215,000 years ago, after it failed to adapt its diet or behaviors to environmental changes that began around 700,000 years ago, and put its dense forest habitat in what is now China under threat. Diprotodon. During the Pleistocene Epoch, marsupials grew to enormous sizes, measuring 3 meters or 10 feet long from snout to tail and weighing up to 3 tons. Diprotodon was the largest pouched mammal that ever lived, outclassing even the giant short-faced kangaroo and the marsupial lion. It lived for about 2.6 million years and went extinct roughly 50,000 years ago. Like many massive herbivores of its time, Diprotodon had a heavy quadruped build and a large belly. It had a long and narrow skull with a small brain case. The top of its head was depressed, a feature seen in many other marsupials. The skull also had an unusually large nasal aperture. Scientists think that they either had a large nose or a short trunk. Many Diprotodon fossils have been discovered in the vicinity of shrinking, salt-covered lakes. Evidently, the giant wombats were migrating in search of water, and some of them crashed through the crystalline surface of lakes and drowned. It is regarded as a mega herbivore, consuming as much as 220 to 330 pounds of vegetation daily. The large incisors of this marsupial helped pull vegetation from the ground. It consumed mostly shrubs, leaves, and grasses. The jaws of this carnivore were powerful. This would have allowed them to consume a wide range of plants, including tough, fibrous grasses. The difference in the sizes of these sexes implies that Diprotodon had a polygynous mating system, which is characterized by a single male that mates with several females. At some sites, large numbers of individuals of only one sex have been recovered, which suggests that they lived in sexually segregated herds for at least part of the year. Diprotodon was a tasty snack for the giant monitor lizard Megalania, as well as the quincana, a plus-sized Australian crocodile. At the beginning of the modern era, the giant wombat was also targeted by the first human settlers of Australia. The moa, also known as the giant moa, was a genus of large-sized birds that were endemic to the island nation of New Zealand several centuries back. These flightless birds, which existed in 9 species under 6 genera, lived in the country for several thousand years before the Maori colonists settled in the country in around 1300 AD. In recent years, efforts have been undertaken by scientists for the revival of this extinct creature. Soon after the arrival of the Maoris, the entire genera of the bird was soon taken to extinction by means of regular hunting. The colonists hunted the moas by driving them into pits and also robbing their nests. They were killed for food. From the mid-1860s to the 1980s, several amazing specimens of moa remains have been found in the semi-arid region of central Otago, the aridest region of New Zealand. These specimens, exhibiting soft tissues like muscles, skin, and feathers, were mostly preserved through desiccation when the moa died in a naturally dry site. The 2 larger species, Dinornis robustus and Dinornis nova zelandiae, reached about 3.6 meters or 12 feet in height, with neck outstretched, and weighed about 230 kilograms or 510 pounds, while the smallest, the bush moa, was around the size of a turkey. 36 complete eggs of different species of moa, which have now been collected by the museums, differ greatly in size, starting from 120 to 240 millimeters or 4.7 to 9.4 inches in length, and 91 to 178 millimeters or 3.6 to 7 inches in width. The specific length and other features largely varied between the different moa species. However, it is clear that all the moa bird species largely resembled the emus and ostriches. Their feathers were large and up to 23 centimeters or 9 inches long. Moas were primarily solitary birds that lived in the regions with dense to mixed vegetation. Morphological analysis of skull and beak, fossilized contents of the gizzards, as well as stable isotope analysis of the bones, suggested that these birds were herbivores and fed on a wide variety of plant matter. Because moa are a group of flightless birds with no vestiges of wing bones, questions have been raised about how they arrived in New Zealand and from where. Many theories exist about the moa's arrival and radiation in New Zealand, but the most recent theory suggests that they arrived in New Zealand about 60 million years ago and split from the basal moa species, Megalapteryx, about 5.8 million years ago, instead of the 18.5 million years ago split suggested by Baker. Megaloceros. More than 20,000 years ago, early humans were drawing giant deer on the walls of caves in what is now southern France. It's hard to imagine they weren't motivated by awe. Standing 2 meters tall at the shoulder, the height of an average doorframe, these enormous deer would have been a captivating sight. Especially the males, with their huge antlers up to 3.5 meters in width. The earliest fossil record of the giant deer is from 400,000 years ago, and the last fossil record is from 8,000 years ago. It is thought the species probably slowly died out due to a changing climate. The male deer shed their antlers in spring, then grew a new pair during the summer months, ready for the mating season in autumn. Males had to be built to carry the heavy antlers. We know from looking at their fossils that the top of their skulls was extra thick, and that they had very sturdy neck vertebrae. Fossils also indicate that the vertebrae in the shoulder region were elongated, suggesting males had a hump on their backs with muscles that might have helped to carry the weight of their huge antlers. The Irish elk had an extensive range in the Eurasian region. Their home range extended from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to Lake Baikal in the east. As with all deer species, the Irish elk primarily subsisted on vegetation. Researchers speculate that their diet consisted of a variety of leaves, grasses, herbs, shrubs, fruits, and stems. These colossal deer adopted a mixed feeding behavior, alternating between grazing and browsing on leaves. Marks on fossil bones suggest that the Irish elk was prey for hyenas that usually dragged their bodies into caves. Humans would have constituted significant threats to them as well. While there isn't enough evidence to show deer hunting by humans, the expansion of Neolithic settlements was dominant during the latter part of their existence. Climate change was a huge threat to their feeding and grazing, and wild animals such as the cave lion and saber-toothed tiger would also have attacked them. Pachycrocuta. Pachycrocuta is an extinct genus of prehistoric hyenas. The largest and most well-researched species is Pachycrocuta breviostris, colloquially known as the giant short-faced hyena, as it stood about 90 to 100 centimeters or 35 to 39 inches at the shoulder, and it is estimated to have averaged 110 kilograms or 240 pounds in weight. Pachycrocuta first appeared during the late Miocene, Mycenaean 7.2 to 5.3 million years ago. By 800,000 years ago, it became locally extinct in Europe, with it surviving in East Asia until at least 500,000 years ago, and possibly later elsewhere in Asia. There is a possibility that extant brown hyena is a member of this genus, along with the extinct Pleiocrocuta and hyena prisca. A wealth of extensive bone material was discovered at the renowned Zhoukoudian cave site in northern China, likely representing the remnants of animals that utilized these caves as shelters for countless millennia. Similarly, at Venta Mycena in southeastern Spain, a vast collection of Pleistocene fossils serves as evidence of another ancient den. Additionally, in the Pabbi Hills of Pakistan, the remains of animals scavenged or hunted by Pachycrocuta were found accumulated, comparable to the modern-day striped hyena. Pachycrocuta is often proposed to have been a kleptoparasitic scavenger, feeding on the kills of other predators like saber-toothed cats. Pachycrocuta likely scavenged for sustenance, possibly with a preference for such meals due to its robust build, which was ill-suited for prolonged pursuit of prey. In this aspect, it differed from today's spotted hyena, which is more agile and, contrary to its scavenger reputation, predominantly hunts its own prey, but often yields to lions.